Everybody, thank you very much for joining us in the Sacred You community. And we are looking at how well do you manage change tonight? And not just tonight, but all the time. So tonight's topic is that. And this is a really dear one to my heart, of course, because I am Bex Smith, the cheerleader for change. And I'm really here to help people manage change, and that's any change that they have in their life. And it may be something as simple as an internal emotional change, or it might be something big like an external change that is imposed upon you. So while you might not always be able to recognize the impact that change has on our lives, we can almost recognize the symptoms. So things like anxiety, burnout, feeling stuck, becoming a bit emotionally overwhelmed. Perhaps you're feeling restricted, like the weight is on your shoulders. Maybe some choices, others are diminishing or belittling your choices. And maybe you're feeling very little compassion from others. So we're going to chat about all of those things today, and about how you can better manage these stresses so that you have the ability to understand and use your emotions in a positive way as you learn to adapt and grow in our changing environment. And if anybody thinks that they don't go through change on a daily cycle, even hourly cycle, I would like to say, then, I think that you probably need to just have a look in the mirror and just have a self-reflection, because there's change happening all around us in our external and also in our internal. So I'm joined here with some beautiful leaders and thought leaders tonight to talk about this subject and also share their personal experiences, because I think a personal experience that's shared, hearing a story or an experience of somebody else, can also help you perhaps identify or move through something that you're going through as well. So I'm very excited to introduce our panelists tonight, and we're going to start with Joyita to introduce herself and where she's from and what she does.
Hi, I'm Joyita. I'm from India, and currently it's very sultry and it's about to rain over here. I am a Reiki Grandmaster. I'm a holistic healer. I am also the host of this tribe called The Child Within, where we work on the inner child issues. I have been in this practice for a quarter of a century now, and I am honored to be associated with Sacred You community, where I get to interact with our amazing hosts. I get to meet a lot of tribe members, and I learn their stories. I share experiences with them, and the wonderful and hardworking beings. So that's about me.
Excellent. We're going to thanks, Joyita. We're going to head over to Mindy now to introduce herself.
Well, for me, it's definitely good morning, as it's 5 o'clock in the morning here in Florida. I'm a recent transplant. Moved down from New Jersey just in time for COVID. So that was definitely a lot of change in my life, because it closed my company. However, it opened up a lot of new opportunities. And I am now co-founder of the Center of Influence community, which is aimed at authors, coaches, consultants, being able to have a community where you can come in and get advice on whatever it is that you need, and be in a really fabulous anthology. So that, hence the title, Author, Wrangler, and Wordsmith. So that's me.
Fabulous. Very interesting, Mindy. Love to know more about that as well tonight. And we're going to head over to Jo now as well. Who, what, and where you are, Jo?
Hello, everybody. I'm Jo Cooper. I'm in the UK, so yeah, morning here as well, but not as early as it is with Mindy. So I'm an energy healer. I work very much with the quantum field. I start with the physical body. So I work with psychosomatics and work with patterns that the physical body gives me to identify emotional blocks effectively, energy blocks. And then I clear the energy, stagnant energy from, situations long since past, limiting beliefs and conditioning and all that kind of thing.
Fabulous. Thanks, Jo. And Natasha, thanks for joining us. Would you like to let us know who, what, and where you're coming from?
Hi, my name is Natasha Sharma. I'm originally from the UK, but now I live in Bombay, India, and I'm on the verge of a big well, it's not a verge. I'm in the middle of one huge, massive change, like you said, Bex, changing on an hourly basis. After living in this city for 23 years for myself and 32 years for my husband, we are moving cities. We're moving to a much smaller city called Pune. And we are then building a home, which some of you know, we've discussed it. We're building a home up in the mountains. So yeah, it's a lot of psychological, emotional, etc., etc. But I'll get into that later in the conversation. I'm an author, speaker, and a mentor. My mission is to have conversations about death. That's what I write about, I speak about, and my passion is money and manifestation. And to support on that journey, I have a tribe in the Sacred You community called Money, Mindset, Manifestation, Magic on Thursday mornings for, oh my goodness, let's not even get in the time zones. It's on Thursdays. Okay. Thank you for having me here today.
Excellent, and thank you very much for joining us. And as you can see, we've got a huge international panel discussion this evening. And I am also coming to you, but from Australia. So I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, and going to be hosting the Sydney tribe in the Sacred You community. So we're having a local tribe meetings, and we want people to come along and just to have that time to connect, whether it's for networking or for connection, just the time to be able to stop and come and meet some like-minded people. So let's jump into some of the questions for tonight, because it is a rich topic, and I know that I've met a few of you and have heard some of the changes that you've already gone through and that you're going through. So I'm excited to see where you're at with that. But also love to know a little bit more about our other panelists as well. So let's jump in with the first question that will go to Mindy at this stage. So how do you typically respond to change in your personal or professional life?
Oh, I take it as a challenge. Change is actually not an uncomfortable subject for me, because I have experienced so much change in my life. It's just become something that you deal with. You get up, you put on your big girl pants, and you deal with it. So it's not something that really, manifests as emotion that much with me. It's very much a practical, my inner MacGyver comes out when change hits. It's like instantly, okay, how do I fix this, change it, morph it? What do I do with it? So that's typically how I deal with change, is just MacGyver it and make it positive.
I like that. You named one of my favorite shows, MacGyver, but also one of my favorite sayings is put on your big girl pants, which my mother actually I've got a little picture there that my mum gave me, which is put on your big girl pants, you're going to be okay. So I love that you mentioned that, Mindy. Joe, how about yourself? How do you typically respond to change in either your personal or professional life?
Well, I think, what you said, Bex, about, change is happening all of the time is very true. So I think having tools to deal with that on a literally a daily basis is really important. So, some changes obviously are much bigger in life, like maybe moving house or changing job, career and things like that. But then there's lots of smaller changes going on as well. And I think the way I deal with them these days is always the same. For me, it always comes back to emotions, and it always comes back to how does it make you feel. So if there's a change, particularly if I'm not sure if I want to make the change, for example, it's very much a case of tuning in and thinking, well, how does it make me feel? Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? And really, allowing those emotions to come forward, acknowledging that they're there and allowing them to process. And I think what can be quite important often is not to make decisions about change too quickly. So certainly for myself, I find that my sort of reaction in the moment might be quite quick and quite definite. But what I like to do more and more is spend some time just processing those emotions that come up and sort of seeing, a few hours later or sleep on it the next day, do I still feel the same way about it? But very much, working from the point of view of emotions, because I believe very strongly that our body holds so much wisdom and has so many answers. So I really try and tune in internally to get that wisdom to guide me, really.
I love that. And I think we've talked about that before, about that body awareness and that connection to that body felt sense, which is really that experiential approach that I bring also and yourself has talked about it, to experiencing the approach to dealing with change. I also think about that you can't really feel successful without allowing yourself to experience your emotions. So to be able to experience your emotions when you're going through change actually gives you the opportunity to accept what is happening and not see it as an imposed change, but rather an accepted change that you can then be a part of, rather than it being an external thing to yourself. Love that, Jo. Love that thinking and that connection to body sense. Joyita, how would you like to describe, and I will tell you the question again, how do you typically respond to change in your personal or professional life?
Okay, so the only thing which is constant in our life is change. It's a very cliche thing, but yes, it is very important. And many of these changes are dating back to our sanskars. When we talk of sanskar, they means they are certain parts of our conditioning which are there from our past lives. So how we react to a change also depends upon our conditionings. So yes, we know that there has been a change. So in my life, the conditioning has been that my father had been from pre-partition, he was in a different place, and during partition, he relocated, and somewhere those genes got passed on to me. And my mother was on the other side of the border, and then they also moved here. So certain conditioning I would have had. So change comes very naturally to me. Also, I've had a very supportive partner who had always, whenever I used to feel overwhelmed, he always used to say, okay, we'll deal with it tomorrow. So tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So, and suddenly you realize that you have been able to overcome that change. So the support system for me has always been good. And that is how I have been able to manage it well. And it's not a big thing for me because I always know that if something doesn't change, it gets stagnated, it drops. So it's absolutely fine.
I love that. And I love that you brought up that it is about, what is actually in your belief systems, or what you've been raised with, or the different influences that you've had along your lifetime as well too. They are imprints on how you deal with change or certain aspects that might pop up in your life. And support networks, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more with questions about how do you deal with it particularly, or what advice you can give. But I think support systems are really important when you're going through change, because it helps you reflect and identify some of those emotions that you're going through, which may be things that you can see in your Johari window, I call it, for those that know that, being able to know who you are and see what you see, but then also reflect through others and ask them to reflect back to you what they're actually seeing in your emotions or in your projections of your temperament, behaviors, etc. as well too. So it's a really big insight into opening your window to yourself. So Natasha, last but definitely not least, I'm sure, how do you typically respond to change in your personal and professional life?
So if I'm going to be completely and totally honest and authentic, my first response to change, whether it's small or big, is to go into ostrich mode. So I literally go into my bed, pull the covers over my head, and I say, that's it, I'm out. So much so that it went from a joke. So when it was established as a pattern, so first it used to happen internally, and now I started doing it in external space, like literally just going into like hibernation. So like right now we're on the verge of calling them movers and packers for the shift, and we just came back from signing the papers, getting the keys for the house and everything. And then I told my husband, that's it, 2 days, just give me 2 days, I ain't doing nothing. And he respects that now because he understands that I really mean it. And one of the strongest reasons that I've been able to identify exactly what I need and how I need to process things has been human design. It's been really, really instrumental in, I don't know how many people know about human design, but I'm a projector, and my energy is very, very limited, and I need to be able to deal with things internally before I can do them externally, and vice versa. If external things happen, I have to process it internally. And yeah, and that sort of goes to any kind of change, really, from the smallest to the biggest, to personal to professional, to pretty much everything.
Love that, Natasha. And there are human design is great. I do personally like that one myself, and have tried to understand myself through that. And I think different tools that resonate with you to help you understand who you are or what sort of makeup you have can really help you understand yourself, to be able to then know what support mechanisms or things that you can do to connect with that. I have a flow report, which is quite similar, but it connects in with the elements on what actually element you need to actually help you continue that flow through change. So I do love that. And mine's based on astrology and certain other things as well too. So that's very cool. Next question, I think. What are some of the common symptoms or signs that you can see, either perhaps through people that you've helped go through change or how you've helped yourself? What are some of those symptoms or signs when you can identify that you're going through some sort of change? So I think Joe's nodding there. So we'll start with Joe, then we'll go to Mindy.
I think, again, you know, our body gives us those signs. So I think certainly things to look out for, you know, when a pattern or something, a situation is about to change, you know, we might start to feel anxious, you know, we might literally feel a little bit kind of knots in our stomach, that kind of thing. I think as well, things like, you know, we tend to feel tired, you know, we've got all of this extra stuff going on round in our mind, going round and round. So I think, you know, feeling tiredness, you know, just that drop in energy levels is something that's well worth looking out for. And I think it's a time really when you start to notice that, really time just to make sure that you're practicing self-care quite carefully. So you're supporting and nourishing your body, sort of eating well, drinking water and that kind of thing, to allow that extra energy, you know, to give support to that extra energy that's suddenly sort of whizzing around sort of in your mind and in your physical body as well.
Yeah, change can chew up energy, can't it? It can chew up physical energy, but also, you know, that being satiated as well too. So
absolutely, and it can drain your energy really quickly. You know, if you're not looking out for it. So I think looking out for those signs and recognizing, and you know, the signs are different for everybody, aren't they? I think what's important is to see what's different for you. So if you're suddenly feeling tired, you can think, right, okay, what's going on? And think, well, I'm planning on this change, you know, because it allows you to be kind to yourself. If you understand what's going on, it allows you just to be that bit kinder to yourself, which of course is so important in managing anything like change.
Absolutely. Compassion, self-compassion and compassion for others through change is the ultimate, I think. Mindy, what are your thoughts on that? Thanks, Joe.
I guess for me personally, I tend to see change. Most of the time I see it as positive. So I tend to have more of a positive reaction to it. I'm excited. I'm moving towards something new. But what happens is if there's too much change at once and flips me into overwhelm, that's when I really have to sort of sit back and analyze and say, okay, which of these do I want to deal with first? But in general, you know, I tend to have a positive outlook on change simply because I've had so much of it in my life. I've had a lot of experience dealing with it. My family was called the gypsies growing up because my dad was a contractor. He would build a spec home. We'd move in, make it look pretty, put it on the market. And as soon as it sold, we'd move. So our record year was 3 moves in 1 year. And by the time I was 20, I had moved more times than I was years old. So that was kind of a great proving ground of, you know, getting out my inner MacGyver and just dealing with it. But there are times that you can get flipped into overwhelm, and then you're right. You got to be kind to yourself. You got to take a step back. You got to give yourself a break and not beat yourself up if you don't feel like you're dealing with the change quickly enough or adequately enough, or, you know, there's no such thing. It's your change. You figure out how to deal with it. It's as simple as that.
I love that. And I think what I love about it is that you've just described the emotional cycle of change in relation to optimism and pessimism for me. So I know when I'm actually getting stressed signs is because I'm turning a bit pessimistic. I'm actually noticing that my optimism is turning into pessimism. And so that for me is showing that I'm actually going into that dip of informed pessimism. So what am I thinking that's going to go wrong with all these types of things? And then I go, oh my goodness, I'm in the valley of despair. I need to get back up into, but is that really going to happen? What are the positives of that? What is the change going to bring? Which is then the informed optimism to then the success and fulfillment stage, excuse me. So for me, I think that's that interesting optimism versus pessimism piece that you just mentioned there, Mindy, when you're always optimistic, but you can get sort of overwhelmed in that also. Love it. Natasha, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the main point is that everybody is unique, as Joe said, and everyone deals with things differently and in different like sort of intensities. But I think the theme that's emerging from this conversation is that it's the dips, right? Like whether whatever emotion it might be, it's extra. That's what change brings, whether it be positive change or negative. It's just extra. It's not part of our daily lives. It's not part of our plans. And so therefore, it becomes a sapping, whether it's overthinking, whether it's something not working out, whether it's the pessimism versus optimism, or any way which you look at it, right? And the way that we are approaching change in this conversation so far has obviously been very general. And, you know, we're talking about, I think, pretty much like maybe good things, right? But the biggest change, which I deal with, that's my subject, is death. And so the correlation that I found between death and change, big or small, is that the stages of grief apply to all of them. So when I was talking about going into ostrich mode, that's my shock stage. And then I do find myself a lot of the time at the anger stage. Like that's how I deal. I'm irritated, I have no space for time for others, and But now that I'm conscious that, oh, how interesting, I can use the stages of grief. So now I just call that the process. So the way, because this changes your subject, you have your flow and everything. So I'm kind of using the process, the grieving process, as that. And the 7 stages of grief apply to any kind of change. And since I've like been using that for me to monitor, basically just to monitor, because we all know it's about awareness. Awareness gives you choice. And so I just see which stage I'm at, and I know that the final stage is acceptance. So the minute that I can work my way through it, it's going to be about acceptance. It's going to be about surrender. And surrender doesn't mean a giving up. It means a giving in to what is. So once I reach that stage, then I'm cool. I'm good with it. I'm cool. The people I work with, the people I support in my tribe, I apply the same principles. But like you said, it's compassion first and foremost for yourself and for others.
I love that. And I love that there are different cycles that you can look at, and different ways in which you work with what you're doing, and that's a grief cycle, and being able to see that that's still emotional, and it's all emotional. So we've all got an emotional attachment to change, whether it be through a different belief system, or what we're raised with, or just what we're going through in the moment. And being able to identify that and own that is just so special and important. May not be in the moment feel special, but it's important. Joyita, would you like to talk about some of those stresses that you've identified?
Okay, so I have been on this journey, the spiritual path, for the last 25 years. So the change that I see is that there has been a change in my own personal journey. That is the biggest change that I can see. So earlier, when I began, I could not understand the energy downloads which were happening. It would result in a physical block. I could feel a block on my back, and I used to feel that it's a pain. But now I realize that it's an emotion. So like being a Reiki healer, what we do with people is that we find the metaphysical cause of a disease. So if somebody has, say, a pain in the shoulder, so we go to the deeper meaning of it. That's how we work. And you know that change happens when we go deeper into it. So this is the kind of work which I first done on myself. So I do see the change that the moment I have a headache, instead of popping a pill, which was earlier, now the change is that I just try to find out what is it that is leading to the headache. And what I have worked on myself is what I work on my clients too. So like I work with inner child healing, and what here also we are doing the same thing. What has changed? So earlier there was anger. You know, when a child is not being heard by the parent or by the caregiver, there is anger. And now what has changed is that, you know, we have been able to accept it. Okay, they also must be having their own needs. My needs also matter. So this change is something which I feel I have evolved. You know, evolution is also a change. And that is what I have expressed. I have found it, worked on myself first, and then I'm working this on my clients. And sometimes, you know, it happens parallelly. When you're healing your clients, a part of you also gets healed. And then you suddenly have that voila moment that, oh, there has been a change. Positive or negative, it is there.
There's nothing more beautiful than the ripple effect. The ripple effect of anyone dealing with any emotion that they're coming up with or witnessing or seeing. Sorry, the witnessing is so special. It's just as special sometimes as the individual going through it. Being able to witness someone in dealing with their emotions or their emotional change is really special. So thank you, Joyita, for bringing that up. And I'm sure that your clients are very grateful for your witnessing as well. So let's talk now, because we have talked about some generalisms, Natasha. So let's now talk about how an example. So I'm going to ask for an example of a situation where you've successfully adapted to a significant change, and how did you manage that transition? So we will start with Natasha, and then we'll go to Joe.
Wow, that's like a really difficult question. I mean, I don't know which one to talk about. Well, I suppose let's just stay with my current like situation, since I'm like right in the middle of it. So, I was talking to this lady who lives up in the village where I'm moving to eventually, and she's every time I speak to her, she's really surprised, because Bombay is like New York. It's like if you're living in New York or you're living in London, it's that kind of, I mean, the real estate prices are the same, actually, irrespective of the, you know, the currency. Yeah. It's exactly the same. It's small apartments, it's metro city living, it's a crazy cosmopolitan mix of people, and really fast lifestyle. And, you know, the whole film industry is here, the way that you have theater in New York. So it's an aspiration of everyone to, oh my God, Bombay, you know, it's the maximum city, and, you know, whatever. So for me to be leaving, and especially since both me and my husband have worked in the entertainment industry, he's a music producer, I've worked in films, and I mean, earlier, before my second career. So she keeps on asking, she's like, how can you move from Bombay to Pune? Are you guys really giving up Bombay? Like, it's something that people just don't seem to understand. And I told her that, you know, we've done it. We've got the keys now. And she's like, yeah, but it's an emotional, and it's huge. It's like decades and decades and decades. And if I now look at my life, I've moved lots of different countries, but this is the longest I've ever stayed in one place. And I didn't realize that. And the day that I realized that, I was like, oh boy, this is big. Because there's friends here, there's family here, there's memories here, there's so much hard work. And then, yes, the future's bright, but there's also a huge emotional quotient to this. So what I found myself doing to manage this change is to feel through every emotion, to acknowledge the fact that it is big. And also the fact is that nothing, like Joyita started off the conversation, the only thing constant is change, right? Mm-hmm. I can always come back if things don't work out. The networks here, the foundations here, it's not permanent change necessarily. It need not be. So these things are what helps me like cycle through, understanding that it's okay. Like, so there's this big change, and the other major change is that my very close friend of mine's brother was murdered a couple of weeks ago, and that was while I was up in the mountains. And for me, it was huge. It threw me for a six. I went like deep into that valley of despair. So much so that I started feeling that this is not even earth. I'm sure this is hell. And our only goal is to make it through the other side with our conscience and our moral compass intact. I went so deep. I went so dark. I'm just sharing that here because that's like huge. Huge change on huge change on huge change. And that's life, really. You know, like Mindy said, I mean, what else is life? Our parents and our grandparents, they went through war and so much other changes. So every generation has its challenge. Every individual has their challenges, and it's how we meet it. And acceptance and surrender to what is at the end of it, however you cycle through it. I mean, I just keep on coming back to that because that's really the holy grail, isn't it?
And I love that you really we got to witness, and also that you owned that, you know, change is layered. Like, it doesn't just happen in isolation. You don't get to just go, right, this change is happening now, let's get through this and let's move to the next one. It is constant in the way that it is layered as well. So thank you very much for sharing that, Natasha, and, you know, being absolutely real with your experience as well too. The other thing that I think really captured my attention was that when you said that somebody else, your change is somebody else's desire, potentially. So, you know, that can also then lead to judgment or lack of support. If people are saying, why would you do that? You know, I wouldn't do that. I'm not going to support you, or how could I can't even fathom why you would do that. Sometimes that actually is a bit of a barrier, especially if they're people that are close to you. Or even coming into community, you know, those sorts of things. When there's judgment or lack of support, that can also put pressure on your change experience as well. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Joe, I'm going to read the question again, just in case we've forgotten, but I'm sure you've got some things. So it's really about a personal example or situation where you've successfully adapted to a significant change and how you manage that transformation or transition.
So I completely agree with Natasha that is a really difficult question because it's a huge question. And honestly, I've been through so many changes. So I think probably to sort of sum up the biggest ones, if you like, I think probably one of the biggest changes that I've been through is my definition of success. So I started out my career as an accountant, you know, doing all the things, studying, getting a good job, you know, ticking all the boxes, doing all the work. I won't go through the whole story because it's lengthy. But ultimately, you know, I then ended up with my own business. I was designing kitchens, so I had a kitchen showroom. But then ultimately, I ended up having an accident and a breakdown. So what I realised was that I was really run down. You know, I'd got into this habit of people pleasing and doing all these things, following these expectations. And I have to say, these expectations aren't particularly things that were imposed on me. They were things that I picked up and felt that I had to do. It wasn't that people were telling me to do this stuff. So what I realised was that I basically hadn't been looking after myself. You know, I hadn't been looking after my energy. I wasn't prioritising my needs. I wasn't taking time out. I was just sort of doing all the things, busy, and losing sight of the why, really. You know, losing sight of why it's important, you know, to look after the house, the family, the garden, the work and everything else. So it was really a breakdown that led me to my biggest change, because I realised that I had to do something very differently. So I really up-leveled my healing journey and started taking care of myself. I'd been using Reiki for about 20 years at this point, but I really felt called to, you know, progress that journey. So really, I think what I found the most difficult thing is I've effectively gone from an accountant, which, you know, people, particularly in my community, they understand that, to being an energy healer, which a lot of people don't understand. And, you know, because of the way I work very much with what I see as a beautiful blend of science and of energy. But, you know, I'm working in the quantum field and working with guides and all that kind of thing. And in terms of being able to talk about that, because of course we need to do that on social media, the changes that I've gone through to get from A to B have been, honestly, they've been phenomenal. And the way I've done that, and it didn't happen overnight, of course, and I see a lot of it as an ongoing thing, but the way I've done that is really, as I've already mentioned, you know, I learned to tune into my body. It's like, what messages am I getting from my body? So that's where I get the conditioning of what a proper job looks like, if you like. And really tuning much deeper and getting in tune with my soul. It's like, well, what am I here to do? I'm not here to be an accountant. I'm here to actually help people to heal. I see patterns depending on what ailments, pains, or whatever people have got going on in their physical body. I start to see patterns, which leads me sort of to the energy blocks. So what I do to cope with change is very much how I now help my clients to move from wherever they are to wherever they want to be. It's quite varied in terms of who I help, but I think redefining success from what I perceived it to be to what actually success is for me is massive change, huge change, and makes life so much more joyful and rewarding.
I love that, Jo, and I love that you've really brought that personal experience to your client's experience as well too. But more importantly, you've validated everybody's experience is their own and really important to acknowledge. And it's so awesome that you've been able to, step outside of that zone of understanding of what that accounting job is, to be able to then be in your success with living your truth and being of service to others too, and finding their own body felt sense as well. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Jo.
Thank you.
Mindy, what have you got to share with us? I'm sure that you've already shared a few different things, but an example of a situation where you've successfully adapted to a significant change, and how did you manage the transition or transformation? I like that I've added that word transformation on the end.
Probably the largest change that happened to me was at the grand old age of 19. I married my Australian writing professor and followed him to Melbourne sight unseen. And so, changing countries, even though it was an English speaking country, everybody thought it would just be like America. It's not. And so it was that completely being uprooted from, even though I had a lot of change, I'd always moved around in the same state. I didn't sort of go to a different country. And so here I was, only 2 years into my degree, hadn't finished my degree, looking for jobs in a foreign country. And thankfully, I found that being an American was actually an asset. I would have people say, "Oh, talk, I want to hear your accent." And thankfully, yes, we did both countries kind of speak the same English. So I could at least communicate easily. But that was a huge change, to take a kid from the cornfields of the Midwest and toss her into the middle of Melbourne at the age of 19. I mean, that was a lot of change all at once. And, and it wasn't comfortable. In the first 6 months, I was absolutely miserable, absolutely homesick. And, but once I started settling in, once I got a job I liked, and you start to build a life, then it's back to the whole thing of when change comes in smaller bite-sized pieces, it's so much easier to deal with than if you get the whole basket dumped on you at once. And so it's that, staying away from the dark place, Natasha, that you were referencing, and too much change can push you there. And so you have to think it through. You have to look at yourself. You have to say, okay, the next time the bushel basket gets dumped on me, what am I going to do different so that I don't end up in that dark place? I consider myself lucky in a lot of regards, but one of them is they used to call me the sunny bunny when I was a kid because I was always laughing, always smiling. I seem to be wired more to the positive than the negative, if that makes sense. But there have been times in my life where I have been pushed into that overwhelm, and it's just like I just can't deal with one more piece of change. I'm just so done with all of this. And it's just, it takes some introspection, it takes some practical thought, and it takes, giving yourself a break, not holding yourself to such a high standard that you can never, ever feel that you've successfully dealt with change. And that's kind of the place you don't want to go. And a lot of times we're way too hard on ourselves. We don't give ourselves credit for what we have done. We don't step back and in other words, we give other people a lot more rope than we give ourselves, I guess is the best way to illustrate that. So I've had probably had about 5 points in my life where I've reached that point where I've just total overwhelm. It's not comfortable. It's not nice. And you just have to figure it out. You just have to really almost self-analyze yourself to then be able to have the mechanisms in place so that when that bushel basket gets dumped on you, you've got a way to deal with it. And it's not the same for everyone. It's going to be unique to you as a unique individual. So the first lesson is, give yourself some slack. The second lesson is, figure out, okay, next time this happens, I'm going to do this differently. And it can only be just one thing. You don't have to completely rewrite the whole landscape. So for me, it's always getting to that space of being kind to myself, of having that extra cup of tea. Trust me, I became absolutely addicted to Earl Grey tea living in Australia. That's like the perfect morning is a cup of Earl Grey tea and a piece of Walker's shortbread.
You're sounding very British, not Australian there, Mindy, actually. We are colonized from Britain, so there is that connection there, I'm sure.
Well, maybe I was just hanging out with Australians that have more of a British influence, but
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. That was a really interesting take on it. I think one thing I can say, or two things I can say is every time I go to America, I get asked to speak as well. So it's a vice versa thing about accents. But secondly, being really compassionate to yourself, because, I think that everybody holds a standard for themselves a lot higher than sometimes they hold standards for others as well too. We're willing to give compassion to others a little bit more than we are to ourselves because perhaps we haven't known that before, or perhaps that's just ingrained in who we are as a human society. We need to keep ourselves at a certain standard so that we don't, slip and
yeah. And if you fast forward, because the other end of that spectrum was, 10 years into the marriage, my older husband decided to go off and play house with somebody else. And I did not see it coming. All the apples fell off my cart. I stayed on in Australia another 6 months, and my family was like, okay, why are you still there? And I can still remember being on the phone with my brother and saying to him, well, it just feels like I'm running home to mama. And he said he could tell I was not doing well, either financially or emotionally. And he just said, just come home. We can't help you if you're halfway around the world. And so I packed 4 suitcases and came back to the States at the age of 30 to feel like a foreigner. I didn't fit. I didn't exist as an adult in the States. And trust me, here in the States, it's better to have a bad credit rating than no credit rating. I couldn't get a loan. I couldn't do anything. So I was couch surfing with family, having to go to a friend's house to borrow a computer to be able to do my freelance writing to try to support myself because I couldn't get a loan to buy a computer. And I'll be forever grateful to the lady bank manager who finally took pity on me and loaned me $500 so that I could start my credit rating, I could get a computer, and I could actually start to get my life back on track. So even though I grew up here, after 10 years living overseas, everybody, I came back, everybody had an American accent. I was dealing with green money instead of the Australian monopoly money. And, at the age of 30, starting over in every sense of the word, I'm no longer married. I have no idea what I'm going to do when I grow up. All of my credit history and job history is in another country, and nobody would reference it. So they'd look into their computer and I didn't exist. And then they'd look at me and say, well, where have you been for the last 10 years? Have you been in the big house? So yeah, it's changing countries can definitely be the ultimate change, even if you're going back to what's supposedly your home country.
Absolutely. And just big shout out to the bank manager who gave compassion, I think, not necessarily You know how you described it, but was that compassionate piece. So it's important to have compassion.
And it meant everything to me, because that was because
Yeah.
if nobody let me take the first step, I was just going to stay nailed to the floor in a totally, invisible position.
Excellent. So I think you've touched on two things which we'll move into in a moment once we hear from Joyita, which is our last question to the panel, which will be, how do you actually know when to ask for help or support? Like, what's that moment in time perhaps, and how do you actually ask for support, or where do you look for support? So if people are going through change right now, what are some of the tools or systems or techniques that you can suggest that they actually connect into as well? So thanks very much, Mindy, for being a segue into the next question. But we'll hear from Joyita about an example or situation where you successfully adapted a significant change, and how did you manage your transition or transformation?
Thank you. So I would like to thank each of you, Joe, Natasha, and Mindy, for sharing your life experiences, because it's very, when you share experiences, you realize that, your problems are nothing when you hear other people's issues. So thank you. And so like Joe said that for her, the success of the definition of success changed. Similar thing happened with me, because earlier for me, a success was a promotion in my job. And right now, the definition of success for me is when a client says that, thank you so much for being there. And that's it. That is all that I look for. So this has been a major transformation or a change for me. But more importantly, what I find, the biggest change that I find, which is affecting me in a way, is the technological changes that are happening all around, as well as the societal changes which are happening all around, because we were brought up in a very different way, and our children are being brought up in a different way. Our clients are, dealing with different things, and at times you are at a loss because they use certain terms which you do not know what that means, and also you have to hold space for them. You have to be very kind to them. Normally, what happens is, like, we had been brought up with certain preconditions, preset notions, and we have been taught to obey, and we've done that. Our healing process was based on our conditions. Now I have to work with clients who are from a different condition altogether. Society is changing so drastically. The terms that they use are changing so much, to understand what they are saying, to be patient, to hold their hand. So that has been, it is a change, but it's a basic learning, major learning. So, that learning, that repertoire of knowledge that I get, the kind of people that I get, that's a very different thing that I'm dealing with. Technology has changed. So, I get cases like, oh, that guy has blocked me. So, that is like, I said, okay, so I want that person to unblock me, but you can find your happiness without the person unblocking you. But that is the thing which is deeply ingrained, and then that is something, it is setting them into a panic mode. Somebody has ghosted me. Initially, I really did not understand what it means to be ghosted by someone. So I learned it from my children. So so these changes are what is, I wouldn't say it is overwhelming. It's challenging, and it is nice to, know about certain things and then work upon it, because our knowledge is also increasing by these changes that are happening around. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point that you brought up, which is that external change and technology change. And it's at a different pace for everybody, whether they're, dating and those sorts of things happen. You might not be dating, so you might not know what those terms are, or, those types of things. So I think that's a really good point of everything is changing at pace. And even the things that you don't know about are changing, and even the things that you did know about are changing. So there's all this extra things that potentially, if you do want to move into a new field or a new something, you've got to learn about new technologies and new catchphrases, words. Oh my goodness, urban dictionaries of everything. So really good points, and really good to actually acknowledge that sometimes there is that connection where clients come to you with a different aspect that you don't know about, but the willingness to learn about it and to understand it from a healer's perspective, or, from a person who's working with clients, I think that is also a great bit of information for those that support other people, to know that a change might be that you've got to learn something new yourself to actually help support somebody else in something that they're going through. And isn't that a blessing, but also sometimes a difficult thing to get. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to still stick with that question, but I'm going to ask you to maybe give us 1 or 2 examples of where you can find support and how you can find support. And then I'm going to get everybody to talk about some of their offerings and how you can get in contact with these beautiful women to get support from them individually as well. So we're going to go to Joyita, I think, first, to get a sense of how do you work out when it is to get support? So how and who you'd go to for support? What are some of your techniques?
So the first thing, or the first person that I go to, is my Reiki master. So this would be not in person, may not be in person, but I go to Reiki. I always turn to Reiki for support, and most often I get the answers, because this is what is a part of me. I'm not separate from that. So when we realize that we are one with spirit, is when, I just remind myself, spirit and I are one. And, the first burst of courage comes to deal with the situation. And then I have also got the support of some good friends. My childhood friends are still in touch with me. So, there has to be one person who you need to talk to. And sometimes it could be my daughter. So, I just say that, hey, how are you? And she would immediately know, oh, mom, what is going on in your life? And that a few chit-chat may not be about that issue, but about just a discussion, and you start feeling better. So, yeah, those are the 2 things I do.
Excellent. Thanks, Joyita. Mindy, what are your thoughts on getting support and who to go to?
Oh, my first stop is my new husband. Well, I can't say new. I've been married to him for 23 years, but I did get very lucky the second time around, and he's always my first stop. And he's not always patient, and he's not always kind. But he does point out the reality. So if I'm not really looking at the situation, and he'll, he's the one that tells me to put my big girl panties on. But then I have a sister, I have a mother. So it depends. I know if it's a health issue, I go straight to my sister because she's knowledgeable and she has a lot of the same health issues that I do. So it's almost like finding your special person for the different types of change and the different types of issues, because every change is not the same, and you're not going to go to the same person for help. So you really do need that network of reciprocity, because, I'm the first stop for a lot of other people in terms of them saying, oh, this has happened, how do I deal with it? And so I think it's just, purposely building that network and knowing who to go to for a particular change or a particular issue that you want help with. I think that gives you, that sense of support, that sense of you're not alone, and it helps you stay out of the dark place. So it's important to build those networks of reciprocity.
Absolutely. And I always think that you build the networks or be the networks when it comes to helping people through change, because it's so important to also be able to say, I can't help you with that, but I know someone who can. So that's awesome that you've brought that build and be a network up, Mindy. Love it. Natasha, and then Joe, what are some of the techniques that you use to, when you need to, ask for help?
So it's very interesting that one of the main things that I wrote about in my last book is having a supportive tribe of women who celebrate you as a woman, I'm talking. And it's not gender specific. I'm just saying, as a woman, to have powerful women around me, supporting me, cheering me on, has been integral to my growth and my up-leveling. And the way that I found those communities, and so one is, of course, Sacred You. It's just been a blessing, even conversations like this, being with people who are high vibe, who are evolving, who don't know all the answers, but are exploring and showing up vulnerably, authentically to share their journeys, to inspire others. These spaces are very, very supportive. I don't necessarily feel that I need to, my change is so huge. I don't need to talk to anybody specifically all the time about things, but I do need to be supported all the time, like the whole of me. And being here right now has supported me. It's recharged me. I'm going to get off this panel discussion and go back to my real life, if you will, with a really positive feeling, because we're all high vibe people who, whether we know each other or not, we're across the world, but because we're in the similar frequency, it recharges one another. So of course, I have my tribe, and I do have the time now. It's 8:30 a.m. on Thursdays, the Money Mindset Money Magic Tribe. So so it's coming up this morning, or tomorrow morning. So if anyone's around, please do feel free to jump in. So that's one of the spaces where we just share what we're going through, because the money issue is connected to self-worth. So it's a very, very, very powerful space where we all support each other. I have other communities like that. I have 2 or 3 different communities or spaces rather. And one of them is on Clubhouse, although that's gone down a little bit because I'm just so busy with so many other things. But, it's basically that, finding your tribe. And of course, like everyone else has mentioned, there's best friends and spouses and, all the rest of them. But for my energy level, it's women like you.
I love that. I love that, especially because I am a cheerleader for change. So it is about hoping that all these people that are listening to us are getting that high vibe, that are knowing that we're the cheerleader for their change that's going on, and normalizing that and sharing our experiences. So I know that we're close to the end. I'm still going to get Jo to talk about that, her personal experience on who she goes to and how she does that and when she needs to do that. And then I'm going to go to Joyita to let us know where she can, where we can contact her, and then Mindy, Jo, then Natasha, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So Jo, tell us about how and when you reach out to people.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because I used to be completely and utterly hopeless at it, which is why I ended up, in that situation of burnout and what have you, because asking for help or support, it used to be so far off my radar. And I think, really, I can only reiterate what everybody said here and what Joyita said earlier about sharing. When we start talking, and particularly as Natasha says, in a group of women, when we start talking to other women, we realise that we're all going through the same thing. And just knowing that you're not on your own makes a huge difference, I find. So yes, certainly, by talking in friendship groups, of course, friends and family. But what's been invaluable for me is, and particularly, as I've done different courses, learned different things, I found myself in more containers like this, where I'm surrounded by similar people that are on this healing journey. They're raising the vibration, and that has been huge for me, because it makes me feel very supported. It makes me feel like there's other people there, and there's when you're working within in courses or what have you, you make new friendships with people that are completely in your world, and it's exactly what Natasha said about finding your tribe. But I think as well, for me, what's been really key, particularly more recently, is actually working with a mentor. Somebody that can heal and somebody that can mentor, but somebody that understands what I do and how I do it. And because I have noticed, and I think everybody gets this, as we start elevating, we get to another level, don't we? And there's a little block there. And I don't know if Joyita will agree with this and all of the other healers, but it's often easier to work with other people, I think, to help other people than it is for ourselves. We can do so much ourselves, and then I find we actually need that outside help. So for me, having a mentor, if you like, working with somebody that's kind of what I am to my clients, that's been really, really key for me. It's made a huge difference, and I feel very, very, supported. I've got a tribe now. If anything comes up, I kind of know who to message, who I want to chat to, or who to book a session with.
I love that, Jo. That is so important, that mentoring, and that also peer network, to be able to bounce ideas and be really safe in that space as well too. But people who know who you are and what you do, so that you don't have to re-explain all of that information. Thank you so much for that. We're going to go to Joyita in a moment, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how you can get in contact with me as well. So I am Bex Smith, Cheerleader for Change. So bexsmith.com.au, because I'm in Australia with the AU. And I'm giving a beautiful flow report, an opportunity to really get a sense of how you flow through change, using the elements and nature as a mirror. So being able to really connect with the seasonal changes, we can see all the seasonal changes and all those beautiful changes in nature. How can that actually be that beautiful reflection for us? So I work with the elements in astrology, I Ching and a few other different things, and I have an alchemy in what I do with body awareness and emotional intelligence to bring that into a personalized report for yourself. I'm also the host of the Sydney Tribe, as I said, but I'm also Women's Wellbeing Association. So I'm the president of an association that collects women. No, we don't collect women. We bring women together in a collection and allow, free circles and free online circles. So it can be global as well too. If you want to join some people in Australia, come to Women's Wellbeing Association and check us out. We have an annual gathering and are looking for facilitators to come to Australia and facilitate at our Every Woman gathering, which is a beautiful weekend away where we have a held space, beautiful opportunity to share and facilitators to share their joy and knowledge and experiences with about 150 women coming together. And it's a beautiful space in nature. So Joyita, how can we get in contact with you?
So you can get in touch with me on www.healingmiracles.in because I'm in India. And so there is a button called Let's Talk. The moment you click that button, it will straight away come to my phone. So what I'm offering is a chakra balancing session for your inner child issues. Anyone who's getting overwhelmed with their inner child issues is definitely having one or more or maybe all of the chakras blocked. So we'll just work with them, a one-to-one session where I will help you in balancing your chakras.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And all of these links will be down below in wherever you are looking and seeing us from. So don't worry if you're missing out. You will be able to find it in some form of link in the messages below, comments below, wherever you are. So Mindy, let us know how we can get in contact with you.
Well, I have put my booking link in the chat, and what I'm offering is just a free writing review. Whether you're writing your LinkedIn profile, a blog, something for your website, or you've started your book, come have a chat with me about it. And I can give you some feedback and point you in the right direction of, I always ask the question, what's the end game? What are you trying to accomplish? Then we can backtrack and look and see if what you're writing is going to get you there.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Of course, you can always hook up with me on LinkedIn. Mindy Scarlett. I don't think there's anybody else out there with that handle. I haven't found it yet, but I'm easy to find on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mindy. Joe, how can we find you?
So you can email me at joe@holistically-whole.co.uk. My website's about to have a complete revamp, so I won't bother giving you that. It's out of date. That's something that's very much imminent change there. And what I'm offering is a 6-week program. So I work very much optimize health to optimize wealth. So it's basically a 6-week energetic upgrade, but it's working very much with the physical body to activate your inner vitality. So it's working very much on a health basis to help you to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, with life as well.
Beautiful. Sounds very inviting. Thank you, Joe. And Natasha.
So the best way to connect with me is to just follow me on Instagram, because right now I'm going through so much that's the one place where everything is updated, and then you can always DM me. So my handle is bodyspeak.in on Instagram. And of course, my tribe on our community. So 8:30 a.m. Australian time. The Money Mindset Manifestation Magic Tribe is where I show up every week. It's my one space that I hold. I'm available. I'm there to support you and vice versa. every Thursday. So that actually is my one constant in the middle of all the change I'm going through. So that's about it. And all I can offer right now is my story, because I need to prioritize what I'm going through right now. So I'm sort of dialing back on the professional aspect, but I'm here for you as your friend and your cheerleader.
I love that, Natasha. And that is self-compassion and being able to create some strong boundaries while you're going through change. And I think that's a great reflection, and also a great opportunity for us to end tonight is really having self-compassion for yourself when you go through change, and helping you. Hopefully this discussion has helped you better manage the stresses, so that you have the ability to understand and use your emotions in a positive way to learn and adapt to our growing and fast-paced, rapidly changing environments. So that's the external, but also that beautiful internal aspect of your emotions and how to deal through your emotional change as you go through, because you're not alone. We all have experiences, and we've all had experiences, and that's the beautiful thing about sharing stories and sharing different experiences, that we can relate, or we can sympathize, empathize, or we don't know what's coming. Maybe that's an experience that is coming for you as well too. And just having heard somebody who's gone through it before will give you some strength or some courage or something that you need at the time. So that's our gift to you through the Sacred You community. Please do connect with the Sacred You community, because we have so many panels, so many tribes, so many different discussions happening at any one time. So there's absolutely something out there for everybody. And that's at sacredyou.love. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. And I'm going to sign off as host, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for being such a